Across from him, Beatrice sat perfectly still on the velvet chaise, her hands folded in her lap like she was holding something fragile. Maybe the last shreds of her dignity. She wore the same cream sweater she'd had on the day they signed the papers for this building 12 years ago. Back then, he'd kissed her forehead and whispered, "This is ours." Now he couldn't even look her in the eyes. "I didn't want it to end like this," he said, voice low, rehearsed. Beatrice didn't flinch. But it did. Her voice wasn't angry. That was the worst part. It was calm, resigned, like she'd already mourned him long before tonight. "You've been distant for months?" she continued, eyes fixed on the marble floor. "I told myself it was stress, the merger, the travel. But I saw the way you looked at her, Bruno, like I was furniture, something you'd outgrown." He turned then, finally meeting her gaze. Her eyes, those deep, warm brown eyes that used to light up when he walked into a room, were dry, empty. "It's not about outgrowing you," he said, stepping closer. "It's about feeling alive again. Camila makes me feel seen." A faint, sad smile touched Beatrice's lips. Seen? Or wanted? Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She stood slowly, smoothing her sweater. "You built this empire with my silence, Bruno. I canceled job offers, moved cities, held your hand through panic attacks you never told anyone about. I was your shadow so you could shine." Her voice cracked, just once. "And now you're trading me for someone who barely knows your middle name." He reached for her wrist. "Stay. We can fix this." She pulled away gently. "No, you already chose." She walked to the door, paused, and without turning back, said, "Don't worry, I won't make a scene. I never did." And just like that, she was gone. Bruno stood alone in the echoing luxury of everything they'd built, suddenly feeling poorer than he ever had in his life. Outside, the rain fell harder, as if the sky knew a woman had just buried a love that once felt eternal, and walked away with nothing but her name and her pride. But what Bruno didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that Beatrice wasn't walking toward ruin. She was walking toward rebirth. And in 3 weeks' time, she'd be standing on this very doorstep again. Not as his wife. Office, a steaming espresso in one hand, his revised schedule in the other. She'd been his executive assistant for 18 months. Long enough to memorize the way his brow furrowed when he lied. Long enough to notice how his wedding ring had vanished 3 weeks ago. First from his finger, then from his desk drawer, then from every photograph in the penthouse. "Your 10 o'clock canceled," she said, setting the coffee down. Her voice was smooth, professional, but her eyes lingered a second too long on his. Bruno looked up, exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. But when he saw her, something softened. "Thanks, Camila." She didn't leave. Instead, she leaned against the edge of his desk, just slightly, close enough for him to catch the scent of her perfume. Something light, citrusy, nothing like the warm amber Beatrice used to wear. "You look tired," she murmured. "I am." He rubbed his temples. "It's been complicated." She nodded slowly. "I heard you moved out." A beat of silence. He didn't deny it. Camila swallowed, then took a breath like she was stepping off a cliff. "I never wanted to be the reason for your pain, Bruno. But I can't pretend I don't feel what's between us." He looked at her then, really looked. Her dark eyes shimmered with something raw. Hope, fear, longing. She wasn't just his assistant anymore. She was the mirror reflecting the man he wanted to believe he still was. Desired, relevant, alive. "I left her because I couldn't breathe," he admitted, voice low. "Every morning, I'd wake up next to someone who knew me too well, and not at all." Camila reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. "Maybe you don't need someone who knows you. Maybe you need someone who sees you." He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. The contact sent a jolt through him, electric, dangerous, intoxicating. Later that night, in the dim glow of her apartment, rain pattering against the windows, he kissed her like he was trying to erase 12 years in one breath. She kissed him back like she'd been waiting her whole life for a man like him to finally choose her. You're not just a rebound, she whispered against his lips, as if reading his guilt. I know, he lied, but deep down he wasn't sure. All he knew was that with Camila he felt young again, desired, uncomplicated. She laughed at his jokes, admired his decisions, never questioned his late nights or sudden mood swings. She didn't carry the weight of their shared history, the miscarriages they never talked about, the promises broken in silence, the slow erosion of love into routine. With her, he could pretend he was starting fresh. Yet, as he lay beside her that first night, listening to her steady breathing, a quiet voice in his chest whispered, "This isn't freedom, it's escape." Ippy smile. "Hey," she murmured, reaching for his arm. "You're up early." "I have to go," he said, voice tight. "There's things to settle." She sat up, the sheet pooling around her waist. "At the house." He nodded, not meeting her eyes. "You're really doing it, then?" she said softly. "You're leaving her for good." "It's already done," he replied, but the words tasted like ash. By noon, he stood in the grand foyer of the mansion, their mansion, where every tile, every chandelier, every framed photograph whispered memories. Beatrice was waiting in the living room, standing by the fireplace, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just looked at him, really looked, and in that gaze he saw 12 years of love, loyalty, and quiet sacrifice crumbling into dust. "You brought her here already, didn't you?" she asked, voice steady but hollow. He flinched. "It wasn't like that. I needed space." "Space?" Her laugh was brittle, sharp. "You moved your mistress into our bed before the ink on your goodbye was even dry." "I didn't plan it like this," he said, stepping forward. "But I can't keep pretending, Beatrice. We haven't been us in years." She turned toward the window, where the garden they'd planted together bloomed in silence. "Do you remember our first anniversary? You brought me daisies because you couldn't afford roses. You said, 'One day, I'll give you everything.'" She paused, voice trembling now. "I never wanted everything. I just wanted you." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "Don't," she whispered. "Don't cheapen it with that word. You didn't lose me by accident, Bruno. You chose to walk away." He reached into his coat and placed a set of keys on the marble console. "I'll send movers for my things. Camila and I will stay at the downtown loft for now." Beatrice turned slowly. "So that's it? You erase me like I was just part of the furniture." "I'm not erasing you," he said, desperation creeping in. "I'm just choosing a different life." She walked to the door, opened it, and held it wide. "Then go live it." He hesitated, searching her face for forgiveness, for rage, for anything. But there was only stillness, a calm so deep it terrified him. As he stepped past her, she spoke one last time, so quiet he almost missed it. "You'll miss this, not the house, me. And when you do, don't come back." The door clicked shut behind him. Outside, Camila waited in the silver sedan, window rolled down, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked as he got in. "Yeah," he lied, staring straight ahead. "It's done." But as they drove away, Bruno didn't look back. He couldn't, because deep down he already felt it, the first cold ripple of regret. Listening to the silence she'd once filled with laughter, with plans, with love. Then, slowly, she walked upstairs. Room by room, she moved like a ghost through the life they'd built. The closet still held his suits, his cologne lingering in the air. The bathroom sink had 2 toothbrushes. The bed, still made, still untouched since the night he'd last slept there, looked like a museum exhibit titled Marriage, Final Days. She didn't cry again. The tears had dried into something harder, sharper. Resolve. Downstairs, she pulled a single suitcase from the hall closet, the old leather one she'd used on their honeymoon. She packed quickly. A change of clothes, her grandmother's locket, the small savings ledger she'd kept hidden behind a loose baseboard in the kitchen. No photos, no mementos, just the essentials. As she zipped the case, her phone buzzed. A text from her oldest friend. Lena, heard what happened. I'm outside. Doors open. Beatrice paused, then walked to the window. Lena's car idled at the curb, engine running, face set in quiet fury. She took one last look around the grand living room, the fireplace where they'd toasted their first Christmas here, the piano she'd never learned to play but always meant to, the window seat where she'd sat for hours waiting for him to come home from just one more meeting. Then she turned off the lights. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway. She rolled her suitcase down the front steps, each click of the wheels sounding like a heartbeat. Lena stepped out, arms open. You don't have to do this alone. Beatrice hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and coffee. I know, she whispered, but I have to do it myself. They got in the car. As Lena pulled away, Beatrice didn't look back. Not out of indifference, but because she didn't need to. She carried the house inside her. Every memory, every wound, every truth. Halfway across town, Lena glanced at her. Where to? Beatrice stared out the window at the passing skyline. Somewhere he'll never think to look. Lena nodded. You're not ruined, you know? You're just unchained. A small, sad smile touched Beatrice's lips. Maybe, but I won't be invisible again. Silence settled between them, not empty, but full of promise. Later that night, in a modest apartment above a bookstore, paid for in cash under a different name, Beatrice sat on the edge of a narrow bed, suitcase open at her feet. She opened the ledger, page after page of careful entries. Every dollar Bruno had spent on luxuries while she'd quietly saved. Every bonus she'd redirected into a private account he never knew existed. Every silent sacrifice now transformed into seed money. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Elena? It's Beatrice. Pause. I need your help. Not as a friend, as a lawyer. On the other end, Elena's voice sharpened with recognition. What happened? He left me, Beatrice said, voice steady. But he forgot one thing. What's that? I built half of his empire with my silence. And silence has a price. She hung up, then walked to the window. The city glittered below, cold, vast, indifferent. But for the first time in years, Beatrice didn't feel small. Behind him, Camila padded in barefoot, wrapped in silk. You've been quiet all evening, she said, leaning against the kitchen island. He didn't turn. Just thinking. About her. The question hung in the air, sharp as glass. He finally faced her. I left her, Camila. That should be enough. She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing slightly. It is enough. But you keep looking at your phone like she's gonna text you back. I'm not waiting for anything, he snapped. Too quickly. Camila sighed, walking toward him. Then stop acting like you lost something precious. You chose me. Remember. He wanted to believe her. He really did. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Beatrice standing in that doorway. Not crying, not screaming, just gone. Like he'd blinked and she'd vanished from his life as if she'd never mattered at all. And that terrified him more than anger ever could. At a charity gala 2 nights later, Bruno wore his usual mask. Confident, charming, in control. He laughed with investors, shook hands with city officials, accepted compliments on his fresh start. But beneath the tailored suit, his chest felt hollow. Bruno Moretti, a voice purred beside him. Heard you traded in the old model for something shinier. He turned to see Victoria Lang, a rival investor with a razor tongue and a memory like steel. Her eyes flicked toward Camila across the room, then back to him. Careful. Shiny things scratch easy. He forced a smile. Jealousy doesn't suit you, Victoria. Not jealousy, she said, sipping champagne. Observation. Beatrice was the only one who ever kept you grounded. Without her, well, she gestured vaguely at his chest. You look like a man who's already falling. He stiffened. She's fine. I'm fine. Are you? Victoria leaned in, voice dropping. Because I heard she walked out with nothing but a suitcase. And you know what they say, women who leave quietly? They're the ones who come back with armies. He laughed it off, but the words stuck in his gut like shrapnel. Later, alone in the men's restroom, Bruno splashed water on his face and stared at his reflection. The lines around his eyes were deeper. His smile didn't reach them anymore. What did I do? The thought slithered in, uninvited. He'd told himself he was choosing happiness, freedom, a second chance. But now, surrounded by admirers who only saw his wealth, his power, his surface, he felt more alone than he ever had beside Beatrice, because she'd known the truth. The fear beneath the confidence, the doubt beneath the decisions, the man who cried once after losing his first big client and let her hold him until dawn. Camila didn't know that man. She only wanted the version he performed for the world. Back at the loft, he found her scrolling through real estate listings on her tablet. "Thinking of buying?" he asked, loosening his tie. She looked up, hopeful. "Maybe. Somewhere permanent. With a view. Maybe even a garden." He froze. A garden. Like the one Beatrice had planted. Roses, lavender, jasmine. The one she tended every Sunday morning while he slept in. "You really want to put down roots here?" he asked quietly. "Don't you?" she said, eyes searching his. He wanted to say yes, but the word wouldn't come. Instead, he walked to the balcony, the city lights blurring in his vision. He thought of Beatrice's hands in the soil, her quiet hum as she watered the flowers, the way she'd smile when the first bloom opened. He hadn't just lost a wife. He'd lost the only person who ever saw him and loved him fully. And now, as the wind tugged at his sleeves and the silence pressed in, Bruno realized with chilling clarity. He lawyer, she came every Tuesday with folders full of documents, her voice low but firm as steel. Bruno never officially registered the mansion mortgage in his personal name, Elena said, pointing to a clause in small print. "The property is linked to an offshore company he created, but which you signed as a co-founder, even though you never knew it." Beatrice looked up, her dark eyes shining with a mixture of surprise and suppressed fury. "Firm? Yes. In 2019, during the tax restructuring. He had you sign a package of administrative documents while you were in the hospital, recovering from appendicitis." A memory hit him like a punch. Bruno holding a tablet next to his bed, telling him, "I just need your signature here. Love. Boring tax stuff." She, weak and trusting, didn't even read it. "That man didn't just leave me," she murmured. "He erased me." "But not entirely," Elena replied, smiling coldly, "because that signature gives you rights. And if the company goes into litigation over undeclared debts, the mansion could go to judicial auction." Beatrice remained motionless, the coffee forgotten in her hands. And who would buy a mansion like that at auction? Someone with enough money and enough pain. Weeks passed, while Bruno tried to convince himself he was happy, organizing dinners with Camila, signing contracts with a hollow smile. Beatrice quietly plotted her return. She sold jewelry he had given her on meaningless anniversaries. She withdrew funds from accounts he didn't even know existed. She even took a temporary job at an art gallery, not for the money, but for the connections. Collectors, discreet bankers, people who moved fortunes without making a fuss. One night, Camila snapped. "You can't go on like this," she shouted at Bruno in the middle of the loft, her eyes red. "I put my hand on your arm and you're somewhere else. Are you still thinking about her?" "No," he replied too quickly. Then, "Look at me," he demanded, grabbing her face. "Look at me and tell me you don't regret it." He couldn't. She let out a bitter laugh. "You're a coward. You abandoned her thinking she was weak. But you're the one who can't live without someone to support you. First it was her. Now you expect me to do it. That's not how it is." "Yes, it is," he shouted. "And when I'm gone too, who will be left? Your partners? Your millions? Nobody knows you, Bruno." Only she did. The door slammed shut with a bang that sounded like an omen. Bruno was left alone in the darkness, surrounded by luxury, but emptier than ever. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Beatrice was closing her laptop after a video call with a Swiss banker. "The deposit is ready," he said in French. "Thank you," she replied in the same language, softly but firmly. "Prepare for the auction." After hanging up, she walked to the window and looked at the moon. She felt no hatred. She felt no vengeance. I felt justice was right. And very soon, Bruno would discover that the greatest punishment was not losing a mansion. It was seeing her in the hands of the woman who swore she no longer existed, and realized that she had never ceased to exist. Determination. "He's in deeper than he realizes," Elena said, flipping open the file. 3 shell companies, undisclosed loans. And this, she tapped a highlighted line, a $4.2 million lien on the mansion, tied to a failed tech investment he never told you about. The bank's filing for forced liquidation. Beatrice traced the edge of the page with her finger. "So it goes to auction. In 10 days, Elena confirmed. Minimum bid, $3.8 million. But with the location, the square footage, the history, it'll draw serious buyers." Beatrice looked up, eyes sharp. "Unless someone bids anonymously, through a trust." Elena nodded slowly. "I already set it up. The Cayman entity you funded last month? It's ready. All you have to do is say the word." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft drumming of rain against the window. "I say the word," Beatrice whispered. 3 days before the auction, Bruno sat in his office, staring at a notice from the county clerk taped to his desk. His hands trembled as he read it again. "Notice of judicial sale. Property formerly held by Moretti Holdings LLC." "What the hell is this?" He barked into the phone, pacing like a caged animal. His CFO sounded exhausted. "The bank called in the lien, Bruno. We didn't disclose it properly during the merger review. They're seizing assets." "Seizing? That house is mine. It's not in your personal name. It's tied to the LLC. And the LLC is underwater." Bruno slammed his fist on the desk. "Fix it." "I can't. We don't have liquidity. Not after the Dubai deal collapsed." He hung up, breathing hard. Then he called Camila again, straight to voicemail. She hadn't answered in 2 days. Not since their fight. Panic, cold and slick, coiled in his gut. That night, he drove to the mansion on impulse, needing to see it, to touch it, as if proximity could reverse fate. He parked across the street, watching the dark silhouette of the house against the moonlit sky. The garden was overgrown. A for sale court-ordered sign leaned crookedly on the lawn. He almost didn't see her, but then a flicker of movement near the gate. A woman in a long coat, standing perfectly still, looking up at the windows. Even from a distance, he knew that posture, that stillness. Beatrice. His heart lurched. He stepped out of the car, but before he could cross the street, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows like a ghost who'd already said everything she needed to. He stood there, rain soaking his shoulders, feeling like a trespasser in his own life. The auction day dawned gray and tense. Bruno sat in the back of the county courthouse room, collar tight, watching as bidders filed in. Real estate developers, investors, a few curious socialites. He'd scraped together every liquid asset he had. $3.1 million. Not enough. Then the auctioneer cleared his throat. Lot 47, 12 Crestwood Lane. Starting bid, $3.8 million. A hand rose immediately. $4 million. 4.2. 4.5. Bruno's stomach dropped. He couldn't compete. Then, from the far corner, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat and dark glasses raised a paddle. $5 million. Gasps rippled through the room. The auctioneer blinked. $5 million. Do I hear 5.2? Silence. Going once, twice. Bruno stared at the woman. Something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself, sold. To bidder 89 for $5 million. As she stood to leave, she turned just slightly and met his eyes across the room. And in that instant, Bruno knew. It was her. Beatrice didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply turned and walked out, the courthouse doors swinging shut behind her like a tomb closing. He sat frozen, the world tilting beneath him. She hadn't just come back. The irony tasted like rust in his mouth. He paused, holding a framed photo from their 10th anniversary. Beatrice laughing on a beach in Santorini, sun in her hair, his arm around her like he'd never let go. He set it face down in the box. He didn't deserve to keep it. His phone buzzed. Camila. Again. He ignored it. Outside, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and Beatrice stepped out. She wore a tailored charcoal coat, her hair pulled back, no makeup, just calm, unshakable presence. She didn't look at him as she walked up the front steps. She didn't need to. The house itself bowed to her now. Bruno froze in the doorway, box in hand. "You're early," he said, voice rough. "I wanted to see it one last time before you left," she replied, stepping inside. Her eyes swept the foyer. The chandelier, the staircase, the Persian rug they'd argued over for weeks. "It still smells like your cologne." "I'll be gone by tonight," he said quickly. "Everything's almost packed." She turned to him then, and for the first time since he'd left her, he saw something in her eyes. Not anger, not triumph, but quiet sorrow. "You really thought I'd just disappear, didn't you?" she asked softly. "I didn't think anything," he lied. "I was lost. Lost." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "You weren't lost, Bruno. You were selfish. You traded 12 years of loyalty for a fantasy. And now you're standing in an empty house with a box of memories you don't even know how to carry." He flinched. "I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary," she said, stepping closer. "What you did was erase me, like I was a draft you could delete." He looked down. "I'm sorry." "Don't," she said sharply, then softer. "Don't waste your apology on regret. Save it for the man you might become, if you ever learn the difference between wanting someone and seeing them." A silence settled between them, thick with everything unsaid. Then, from the hallway, a courier appeared, holding an envelope. "For Mr. Moretti. Official notice." Bruno took it with numb fingers. He opened it and his face went pale. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, though she already knew. He looked up, eyes wide with dawning horror. "They're freezing my personal accounts. The bank. They're calling in all personal guarantees. I might not even have a place to go tonight." For a heartbeat, she almost felt pity. Almost. Then she remembered the nights she'd cried silently into her pillow, wondering what she'd done wrong. The way he'd stopped saying good morning. The way he'd looked through her like she was air. She walked past him toward the grand staircase. "I'll have my lawyer send you a list of your remaining items," she said, not turning. "Pick them up by 6. After that, the locks change." "Beatrice," he called out, desperate. She paused on the 3rd step, back still to him. "Please," he whispered. "Just tell me why you did this. Was it revenge?" She turned her head slightly, just enough for him to see the edge of her profile. The same strong jaw he used to kiss when she was stressed. The same eyes that once looked at him like he was her whole world. "No," she said. "It wasn't revenge." She took another step up. "It was justice." And with that, she disappeared down the hall, leaving Bruno standing in the hollow shell of the life he'd thrown away. Alone, broke, and finally understanding the true cost of what he'd lost. At 4:47 p.m., a black sedan pulled up, not the town car from before, but a county vehicle. 2 men in dark uniforms stepped out, holding clipboards. Bruno opened the door before they could knock. "Mr. Moretti?" the taller one asked. "Yes. We're here to serve final notice of eviction per court order 8842B. You have until 6 p.m. to vacate the premises. After that, any remaining personal property becomes the legal possession of the new owner." Bruno swallowed. "I'm almost done." The officer glanced past him into the grand, hollow space. "Place looks like a museum." "It used to be a home," Bruno said quietly. He turned back inside, his footsteps echoing like ghosts in the marble hall. In the study, he found the last thing. A leather-bound journal Beatrice had kept for years, tucked behind a shelf. He'd never read it, never asked. He opened it now, fingers brushing a page dated just weeks before he left. He didn't say, "I love you today," again. Maybe he doesn't anymore. Or maybe he just forgot I need to hear it. His throat tightened. He slipped the journal into his coat. At 5:52 p.m., he dragged the final box to the curb. The rain had soaked through his shirt, his hair plastered to his forehead. He stood there, suitcase in one hand, box in the other, staring at the house that had once been his sanctuary. Then the front door opened. Beatrice stood in the threshold, holding an umbrella. She didn't step out, didn't speak at first, just watched him, drenched, broken, unshaven, like a man who'd finally hit the bottom of the well he'd dug himself. "You look like hell," she said, voice low. He let out a dry laugh. "Feels like it." She stepped forward, just one pace, and handed him a folded envelope. "Your journal. I found it while cleaning. I didn't read it, but I knew you'd want it back." He took it, fingers brushing hers for a split second. Her skin was warm. His was ice. "Thank you," he whispered. Silence stretched, filled only by the drumming rain. "Where will you go?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe a motel, until I figure things out." She studied his face. The dark circles, the hollow cheeks, the raw shame in his eyes. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not forgiveness, but recognition. "You built your whole life on appearances, Bruno," she said. "Now you're standing in the truth. It's ugly, but it's real." He nodded, unable to speak. She turned to go, then paused. "One more thing." He looked up. "The bank froze your accounts because you signed personal guarantees on loans you never told anyone about. Not even your CFO. But the lien on this house? That was your biggest mistake." He frowned. "Why?" "Because," she said, meeting his eyes with quiet intensity, "you used my signature to secure it, without my knowledge. That's fraud." His blood ran cold. "You wouldn't?" "I already filed the complaint," she said simply. "Not to destroy you, but to make sure you can't do this to anyone else." He staggered back as if struck. "Beatrice, please. I'm not your savior," she said, voice firm now. "And I'm not your punishment. I'm just the consequence." She stepped back inside and closed the door. Not loudly, not cruelly, just finally. Bruno stood in the rain, the weight of everything crashing down. Not just the loss of wealth, but the loss of self. He'd thought he was choosing freedom. Instead, he'd chosen exile. And as the clock struck 6, the front lights of the mansion clicked off, one by one, until only darkness remained. He turned and walked away, suitcase wheels rattling over wet stone, the journal clutched to his chest like a last confession. She was pouring chamomile into delicate cups when the doorbell rang. Not the sharp chime of a delivery, a hesitant, almost apologetic press. She froze. She knew that rhythm. Through the peephole, she saw him. Bruno stood on the porch, thinner, unshaven, wearing a thrift store coat 2 sizes too big. His eyes were red-rimmed. His shoulders slumped under a weight no suit could hide. He held no suitcase this time, just a folded piece of paper. Beatrice opened the door, but only the screen, the iron gate between them like a metaphor made real. "You look like you slept in a bus station," she said, voice calm but guarded. "I did," he admitted. 2 nights. She didn't invite him in. "Why are you here, Bruno?" He held out the paper. "I got served. The fraud case. They're moving forward." "I know," she said. "I testified last Tuesday." His face fell. "You didn't have to." "I did," she said simply. "For every woman who signs a document she doesn't understand because she trusts the man she loves." He looked down, shame burning in his cheeks. "I didn't think it would go this far. I thought you'd let it go." "Let it go." She let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You abandoned me, used my name to secure debt, and expected me to disappear quietly while you played house with someone else. And now you're surprised I won't erase the truth." "I'm not asking you to erase it," he said, voice cracking. "I'm asking if there's any part of you that still remembers who I was before I became this." She studied him. The hollows under his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the raw vulnerability he'd never shown her when they were married. "I remember," she said softly. "That's why this hurts." He swallowed hard. "I lost everything. Camila left. My partners cut ties. My name's toxic. I can't even rent an apartment without a cosigner." He looked up, eyes glistening. "I'm not here for money, or the house. I needed to see you, to know if I'm still capable of being seen." For a long moment, she said nothing. Rain began to fall again, light and misty, clinging to the screen between them. Then, quietly, "You're not the man I married, and I'm not the woman you left." He nodded as if he'd expected it. "But," she continued, "that doesn't mean you can't become someone new." He looked up, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. "Don't mistake this for forgiveness," she warned. "I'm not taking you back. I'm not erasing what you did. But if you're truly willing to face what you've done, without excuses, without charm, without expecting me to fix you, then maybe you can start rebuilding." He stood there, rain soaking his hair, tears mixing with the droplets on his face. "Where do I begin?" "By telling the truth," she said. "All of it. To the court, to yourself, and to every person you hurt." He nodded slowly. "I will." She held his gaze for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a key. Not to the mansion, but to the small gatehouse at the back of the property, long and used. "This isn't yours," she said, handing it through the screen. "It's temporary. Rent is $200 a month. You clean the garden. You stay out of the main house. And if I hear one word of manipulation, you're gone." He took the key like it was sacred. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said, already stepping back. "Thank the version of yourself that finally showed up." She closed the door, but this time she didn't lock it. Inside, the women's voices rose in gentle laughter. Outside, Bruno stood in the rain, key clenched in his fist, staring at the house that had once been his prison, and now, impossibly, might become his path back to being human. And high in the window, Beatrice watched him not with fear, but with quiet. He hadn't seen Camila since the night she'd left, until today. She appeared at the edge of the garden just after noon, arms crossed, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not the tension in her jaw. "Living in a shed now?" she said, voice sharp with something between scorn and sorrow. Bruno straightened, wiping dirt from his hands. "It's honest work." She let out a hollow laugh. "Don't pretend you found virtue in poverty. You're here because she let you stay, not because you earned it." "I'm here because I have nowhere else to go," he admitted. "And maybe because I finally understand what I threw away." Camila stepped closer, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, tired. "You used me, Bruno. I didn't mean to." "Of course you did." Her voice cracked. "You needed someone to make you feel powerful after your empire started crumbling. And I was stupid enough to believe you actually saw me." He looked down. "I thought I did." "You saw a reflection," she said bitterly. "Someone who admired you, who didn't challenge you, who wouldn't ask where the money really came from or why your wife stopped smiling." She paused, voice dropping. "But Beatrice, she saw you, flaws and all. And you walked away from that like it was nothing." He didn't argue, because she was right. "I came to say goodbye," she said, turning to leave. "I got a job in Lisbon, starting over." "Good," he said softly. "You deserve that." She stopped, glancing back. "Do you love her?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was too heavy for a simple yes. "I loved the version of myself I was when I was with her," he finally said. "And I destroyed that man before I even realized he was worth keeping." Camila studied him for a long moment, really studied him, and for the first time there was no anger in her gaze, just sadness. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "this is your chance to become him again." She walked away without another word, heels clicking on the stone path until she disappeared through the iron gates. Bruno stood alone in the garden, the scent of jasmine thick in the air, Beatrice's favorite. He knelt and began pulling weeds, his fingers sinking into the soil. It was messy, humbling, real. Later that evening, as he carried a bucket of water to the rose bushes, Beatrice appeared on the back porch, arms crossed, watching him. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I know," he replied, not looking up. "But I want to." "Why?" He set the bucket down and met her eyes. "Because for 12 years, I took your love for granted. And now, I want to earn the right to remember what it felt like to be worthy of it." She didn't smile, but something in her expression softened, just a fraction. "Don't confuse labor with redemption," she warned. "Pulling weeds won't undo what you did." "No," he agreed, "but it's a start." She held his gaze for a long moment, then turned to go inside. But before she closed the door, she said, so softly he almost missed it, "Dinner's at 7, if you're hungry." He stood there, heart pounding, rain beginning to fall again. Not the storm of before, just a gentle rain, washing the dust from the leaves, the lies from the past. Then, as she reached for the water pitcher, he spoke. "I filed the full disclosure with the court this morning," he said, voice low. "Every loan, every shell company, every signature I forged, including yours." Her hands stilled. She didn't look up. "And they're dropping the fraud charges against you," he said. "But not against me. I'll likely face fines, maybe probation. My license to operate as a director revoked." She finally met his eyes. "You did that knowing it would ruin what's left of your reputation?" "I did it because it was true," he said. "And because you deserved to be believed." A long silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Then, quietly, "Why now, Bruno? Why not when we were married? Why not when I asked you 100 times if everything was okay?" He set his fork down. "Because I was terrified," he admitted, voice breaking. "Terrified that if you saw how fragile I really was, the doubts, the failures, the nights I lay awake wondering if I was enough, you'd leave. So I pushed you away before you could." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I wouldn't have left. I would have stayed. I did stay, even when you stopped seeing me." "I know," he whispered, "and that's what kills me the most." She stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the garden glistened under the porch light, raindrops clinging to the petals like tiny diamonds. "You think this changes everything," she said, back still to him. "But it doesn't. You can't undo 12 years of silence with one confession." "I'm not asking you to forget," he said, rising slowly. "I'm just asking you to see that I'm trying." She turned then, eyes blazing with pain and something else, something raw and human. "Do you have any idea what it felt like? To wake up every morning wondering what I'd done wrong? To watch you drift further away while I held the pieces of our life together, hoping you'd come back to me?" He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. "No, I didn't. Not until I was alone in that motel room, staring at the ceiling, realizing the only person who ever truly loved me was the one I threw away." Her breath hitched. "Love isn't just feeling, Bruno. It's action. It's showing up. It's choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard." "I'm choosing you now," he said, voice trembling. "Not to get you back, but because you're worth choosing." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't see the polished businessman, the charming liar, the man who abandoned her. She saw someone broken, yes, but trying to mend. "I can't promise you anything," she said softly. "Not yet." "I don't need a promise," he replied. "Just the chance to prove I'm not the man I was." She held his gaze for a long moment, then turned back to the window. "Finish your dinner," she said. "The rain's letting up." He sat back down, heart pounding. And outside, beneath the clearing sky, the first stars began to appear, his breath caught. He remembered that night, the blood on the sheets, her silent tears in the ER, how he'd held her hand and whispered, "We'll try again," but never asked if she was okay. Never noticed how she stopped buying prenatal vitamins. Never saw how she'd flinch every time a baby cried in a restaurant for months after. He closed the album chest tight. Later that day, while pruning the overgrown jasmine vines, her favorite, he saw her watching. From the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You found it," she said, not a question. He nodded, not looking up. "I didn't know you kept it." "I kept everything," she said quietly, stepping down onto the gravel path. "Even the parts that hurt." He turned to her, voice raw. "I never asked how you were after we lost the baby." She looked away toward the roses. "You were already gone. Not physically, but inside. You buried yourself in work, in meetings, in anything that kept you from feeling it." "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't know how to fix it." "You didn't have to fix it," she said, turning back to him, eyes glistening. "You just had to be there, to let me grieve, to grieve with me." He swallowed hard. "I failed you." "Yes," she said, no bitterness, just truth. "You did." Silence settled between them, heavy but not cruel. Then, softly, "Do you ever think about what our child would have been like?" He looked at the empty space in the garden where a swing might have hung. "Every day." She took a step closer. "I named her in my head. Sophia." His eyes filled. "Sophia. She'd be 8 now," Beatrice whispered. "She'd love climbing these trees. She'd scold you for tracking mud inside." A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "She'd have your stubbornness and my laugh." Bruno reached out, slowly, and brushed a leaf from her shoulder. She didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you," he said, voice breaking. "For her." Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, clear and steady. "Grief doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. And maybe we can carry it together now. Not as husband and wife, but as two people who loved something deeply and lost it and survived." He nodded, tears slipping free. "I'd like that." She didn't take his hand, but she stayed. And in that garden, beneath the same sky that had watched them fall apart, something fragile began to stitch itself back together. Not the past, but a new kind of present. One built not on grand gestures, but on truth, on memory, on the quiet courage to say the names of the things they'd buried. That night, as Bruno lay on his cot in the gatehouse, he didn't dream of boardrooms or bank accounts. He dreamed of a little girl with Beatrice's eyes, running through the jasmine vines, laughing. Memberships revoked. Even the barista at his old favorite cafe pretended not to recognize him when he walked in with $2 and a worn coat, asking for a small coffee. He took it without complaint. Pride, he was learning, wasn't in what you owned, but in how you carried yourself when you owned nothing. Still, the humiliation cut deep. One afternoon, while delivering donated books to a women's shelter downtown, a task Beatrice had quietly arranged, he passed a newsstand. His face stared back from a business tabloid, Fallen Titan. Moretti's empire crumbles amid fraud scandal. Below it, a grainy photo of him leaving court, head down, shoulders hunched. A teenager snickered. "Isn't that the guy who thought he was king of the world?" Bruno kept walking, but his hands shook. That evening, back at the gatehouse, he sat on the steps, staring at the mansion's warm lights. He hadn't told Beatrice about the article. He didn't want her to think he was seeking pity, or worse, that he expected her to shield him. But she found him anyway. She sat beside him, not too close, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Rough day." He didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, "I saw the article." She nodded. "I saw it too. I feel like a ghost," he admitted, voice rough. "Like I'm walking through a life that used to be mine, but no one sees me anymore." "Maybe that's the point," she said, sipping her tea. "You spent years being seen for your money, your power, your name. Now you get to find out who you are when none of that matters." He looked at her, eyes searching. "And if I don't like who I am, then you change," she said simply. "You already are." He exhaled, long and slow. "I sold my watch today, the Patek Philippe. Got $300. She didn't flinch. "Good, good." He almost laughed. "It was worth over $100 grand. And now it's someone else's trophy." she said. But that 300? That's yours. Earned through humility, not inheritance. He stared into his mug, steam curling into the night air. I used to think success was a skyline view and a private jet. Now, I feel more real scrubbing floors than I ever did signing million-dollar deals. Beatrice was quiet for a moment. Then, last week, one of the women here, Maria, told me you helped her son with his math homework. He's failing and his father's gone. You stayed 2 hours past your shift. He shrugged. It was nothing. To him, it was everything, she said softly. That's the kind of legacy you can build now, Bruno. Not in boardrooms, in moments. He looked at her then. Not with desire, not with regret, but with something deeper, gratitude. I don't know how to be this person, he confessed. The one who's kind without expecting anything back. You're learning, she said, and you're not alone. Above them, the stars blinked awake, indifferent to empires and scandals, caring only for truth. Inside the mansion, laughter rose again, women healing, rebuilding, choosing themselves. And on the steps of the gatehouse, a broken man sat beside the woman who'd Bruno, now leaner, quieter, moved through it like a caretaker, not a guest. He fixed leaky faucets, painted peeling trim, taught financial literacy workshops in the parlor. He never entered the master wing, never asked to. He respected the boundary like sacred ground. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the garden, Beatrice found him sanding the old porch swing, the one they'd bought together on their 5th anniversary. Now restored, its wood gleaming under his careful hands. You didn't have to do this, she said, leaning against the railing. I wanted to, he replied, not looking up. It was broken. Things that matter should be mended. She watched him work. The calluses on his hands, the focus in his eyes, the absence of performance. This wasn't the Bruno who charmed investors. This was the man beneath the armor. I got a call today, she said softly, from the city council. They want to feature the house in a program about community-led housing initiatives. He paused, sandpaper hovering. That's amazing. They asked who to credit as founder. He finally looked at her. And she met his gaze. I said, Beatrice Moretti, not out of pride, but because I'm not hiding anymore. He nodded slowly. You never should have. A silence settled, warm and easy. Then, hesitantly, do you ever think about selling it? Starting fresh somewhere else? She shook her head. This house held my pain, but now it holds healing. That's worth more than any profit. He ran a hand along the swing's chain. I used to think owning this place meant I'd won. Now I see it was never about ownership. It was about belonging. She studied him, the humility in his posture, the quiet strength in his voice. You've changed, Bruno. Not enough, he said. But I'm trying. She stepped closer, just enough for the scent of jasmine to wrap around them both. Trying is everything. He looked at her then, not with longing, but with something deeper, reverence. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope, one day, you'll believe I'm worthy of the second chance you gave me. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat on the swing, the wood creaking softly. After a moment, she patted the space beside her. He hesitated, then sat. Not too close, but close enough. Above them, the stars burned steady. Inside, a woman laughed. A sound of pure, unburdened joy. And in that moment, the past didn't vanish. It simply made room for something new. Because healing isn't about erasing what broke you. It's about building something beautiful from the pieces, together or apart, but always with truth. And as the night deepened, neither of them moved. But loneliness, he'd learned, wasn't about being alone. It was about feeling unseen. One rainy Tuesday, desperation clawed its way back in. A letter arrived from his old law firm. The fraud case was moving to sentencing. Fines, possible jail time. His name was mud in every financial circle. No one would hire him. No one would trust him. He stood in the garden, soaked to the bone, staring at the mansion's warm windows. And for the first time since he'd returned, the old reflex returned, not to build, but to beg. He knocked on the back door. Beatrice opened it, drying her hands on a towel. She took one look at his face, pale, eyes hollow, and knew. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. He didn't sit, just stood in the kitchen, dripping on the tiles, voice trembling. "They're going to sentence me next week. I might go to prison, Beatrice. I have nothing left. No money, no reputation, no future." He looked at her, raw and broken. "I need you." She didn't flinch. "What do you need me for, Bruno?" "To vouch for me," he said quickly. "To tell the judge I've changed, that I'm not a threat, that I deserve leniency." His voice cracked. "You're the only one who can save me now." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, quietly, "Is that why you've been here? To earn my trust? So I'd stand up for you in court?" His breath caught. "No, that's not." "Because if it is," she said, stepping closer, eyes blazing with quiet fire, "then you haven't changed at all. You're just using a different kind of manipulation." He recoiled as if struck. "That's not fair." "Fair." She let out a soft, sad laugh. "You left me with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart. You forged my name. You lied to my face. And now, when the consequences finally catch up to you, you come to me. Not because you care how I feel, but because you need me to fix it." "I do care," he insisted, voice breaking. "Every day I wake up regretting what I did to you. Every night I lie awake wishing I could go back." "But you can't," she said firmly. "And you don't get to use my pain as your redemption ticket." He stared at her, tears mixing with rain on his cheeks. "So that's it? You'll let me go to prison?" "I won't lie for you," she said. "But I won't abandon you either." She paused, voice softening. "I'll tell the truth, that you've worked here, that you've helped women rebuild their lives, that you've faced your mistakes when you chose to, but I won't pretend you're innocent, and I won't pretend I trust you completely." He swallowed hard. "That's all I'm asking." "No," she said gently. "It's not. You're asking me to carry your guilt so you don't have to face it alone. But real change means standing in your shame, by yourself." He looked down, shoulders shaking. Then, barely a whisper, "I'm scared." "I know," she said, "but fear doesn't make you weak. Running from it does." She walked to the door and opened it, not to send him away, but to show him the path forward. "The court date is next Friday," she said. "I'll be there, not as your savior, but as a witness to who you've become, if you're honest about who you were." He nodded, tears falling freely now. And as he stepped back into the rain, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt seen. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. Then the door opened. Beatrice walked in. Not in heels, not in power silks, but in a simple navy dress, hair loose, eyes calm. She didn't look at him as she took a seat in the front row. She didn't have to. Her presence was an anchor in the storm. The judge entered. The charges were read. Fraud, misrepresentation, unauthorized use of a spouse's signature for financial gain. Each word landed like a hammer. Then it was time for character testimony. Bruno's lawyer called Beatrice. She rose slowly, walked to the stand, and placed her hand on the Bible. Not because she believed in its power, but because she believed in truth. "Ms. Moretti," the prosecutor began, "you are the plaintiff in the civil case against Mr. Moretti, correct?" "I am. And yet you've allowed him to reside on your property for the past 6 months. Why?" She took a breath. "Because justice isn't just punishment. It's also the chance to become better." The courtroom stilled. "Did he ask you to testify on his behalf?" "He did," she said. "But I'm not here for him. I'm here for the truth." She turned slightly, meeting Bruno's eyes for the first time that day. "Bruno Moretti broke my heart. He betrayed my trust. He used my name without consent. And for a long time, I believed he was incapable of real change." She paused, voice softening. "But over the past months, I've watched him fix leaky faucets for women who've been abandoned. I've seen him stay late to help a teenager fill out college applications. I've heard him apologize, not once, but every day, through action, not words. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. I don't forgive him for what he did. Forgiveness isn't mine to give lightly, but I see him now, not the man who left me, but the man who came back. Humbled, honest, and trying. Bruno's throat tightened. He looked down, unable to bear the weight of her honesty. After her testimony, the judge recessed for deliberation. Outside, under the courthouse awning, Bruno found her standing in the rain, arms crossed, staring at the street. "You didn't have to do that," he said hoarsely. "I didn't do it for you," she replied. "I did it because the world needs more people who choose truth over vengeance." He stepped closer, rain soaking his shoulders. "Whatever happens in there, thank you for seeing me." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Don't thank me. Prove me right." The judge returned an hour later. Probation, community service, full financial restitution. No jail time, but a permanent mark on his record. A life rebuilt from zero. As they walked out together, the rain easing into mist, Bruno stopped. "I don't know where to go," he admitted. "I can't stay at the gatehouse forever." Beatrice looked at him, not with pity, but with quiet clarity. "You don't need a mansion to be whole, Bruno. You just need purpose." She reached into her bag and handed him a folded paper. "There's a non-profit downtown that helps formerly incarcerated men reintegrate. They need a financial literacy instructor. I told them about you." He opened it. "An interview confirmation. Tomorrow." His hands trembled. "Why are you helping me?" "Because healing isn't a solo journey," she said. "And maybe neither is redemption." She turned to leave, then paused. "You'll be okay, Bruno. Not because I say so, but because you're finally choosing to be." And as she walked away, not looking back, Bruno stood in the soft rain, the paper clutched to his chest like a lifeline. For the first time, he wasn't running from his past. He hadn't seen Beatrice in months, not since the sentencing. Not because of anger, but because both were tending to their own gardens. Then, on a crisp October morning, an invitation arrived in his mailbox, handwritten, on thick cream paper. "You're cordially invited to the grand opening of the Sophia House, a sanctuary for women rebuilding after betrayal. Founder, Beatrice Moretti. Date, October 24th, 2025. Time, 4 p.m. Location, 12 Crestwood Lane." His breath caught. Sophia, the name she'd given their unborn daughter. She'd named the house after her. He almost didn't go. What if she didn't want him there? What if his presence cast a shadow on her light? But at 3:55 p.m., he stood at the iron gates, heart pounding, wearing his best suit. The one he'd bought with his first paycheck from the nonprofit. The garden was strung with fairy lights. Women laughed on the lawn. Children played near the restored swing, and a banner fluttered above the porch. "You are safe here." And there she was. Beatrice stood by the jasmine vines, now thick and blooming, wearing a deep green dress, her hair catching the late sun. She saw him immediately, didn't smile, didn't frown, just nodded, as if she'd been expecting him all along. He walked up the path, gravel crunching under his shoes. "You came," she said. "I had to," he replied. "You named it after her." She looked down, fingers brushing a jasmine bloom. She deserved to be remembered, not as a loss, but as love that mattered. He swallowed. "I still think about her. Every day." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I knew you'd understand what this place is." He looked around, at the women hugging, the children running, the warmth radiating from every window. "It's everything the mansion never was when we lived here. Because it's not about ownership anymore," she said. "It's about belonging." A silence settled between them, not heavy, but full, like soil ready for seeds. Then, hesitantly, "Do you ever wonder? What if we'd fought for us? Really fought?" She turned to him, eyes clear. "Yes, but wondering won't change the past. And we've both built something beautiful from the wreckage." He nodded. "You gave me back my humanity," Beatrice. Not by forgiving me, but by refusing to let me hide. She smiled then, small, real. And you gave me back my voice, by finally listening. A little girl ran past, laughing, and for a heartbeat, they both saw her. Sophia, in their minds, chasing fireflies in this very garden. Bruno took a deep breath. I don't expect us to be anything we're not, but can I visit? Help with the workshops? Even if it's just once a month. Beatrice studied him. Not the man who abandoned her, but the man who'd returned, scarred but sincere. Yes, she said, you can. Not as a lover, not as a husband, but as someone who'd learned that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes, it's about letting go, and still showing up. As the sun dipped below the trees, casting long amber shadows, Bruno didn't walk away. He stayed. And in that garden, where pain had once taken root, something new grew. Not a reunion, but a quiet understanding. Guitar, a little girl chasing fireflies with bare feet and wild joy. The air smelled of jasmine, earth, and something deeper. Peace. Beatrice found him there, hands tucked in the pockets of her cardigan, the wind tugging gently at her hair. You're still here, she said. I didn't want to leave yet, he admitted, eyes on the house. It feels alive, like it's finally breathing. It is, she said softly, because it's no longer a trophy. It's a home, for people who thought they'd never have one again. He turned to her then, voice low with emotion. Do you ever regret keeping it? She shook her head. I used to think this house was a cage, but it was never the walls that trapped me. It was the silence. Now the silence is gone, and in its place, there's song. A comfortable quiet settled between them, filled only by the rustle of leaves and distant chatter. Then, from the driveway, a figure appeared, tall, weary, dressed in a rumpled coat. Bruno stiffened. It was him, the man he used to be, or rather, a ghost of that man. Paler, thinner, eyes hollow with the weight of consequences Bruno had narrowly avoided. He stood at the gate, staring at the mansion with a mix of awe and shame. Beatrice followed his gaze. He came back too, she murmured. Who is he? Bruno asked, though he already knew. A man who lost everything, she said, just like you did. Only, he didn't get a second chance. Bruno's chest tightened. What will you do? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the gate and opened it. The man flinched as if expecting rejection. I heard about this place, he said, voice rough. They said you help women. But I'm not. I know what you are, Beatrice interrupted gently. You're someone who made terrible choices, and you're standing on the edge of change. He looked down, ashamed. I don't deserve to be here. No, she said. You don't. But that's not how healing works. She turned and called over her shoulder. Just once. Bruno. He stepped forward, heart pounding. This is Raphael, she said. He needs someone who's been where he is. Bruno met the man's eyes, saw the fear, the regret, the flicker of hope beneath it all. He recognized it instantly. It was the same look he'd worn the day he knocked on this very door, broken and begging. Without a word, Bruno extended his hand. Come on in. There's coffee. As Raphael stepped onto the property, tentative, trembling, Bruno caught Beatrice's eye. In that glance, everything passed between them. Understanding, sorrow, and a quiet promise. She hadn't just rebuilt the mansion. She'd turned it into a lighthouse. And he wasn't the owner anymore. He wasn't even the guest. He was the keeper of the flame. Later, as twilight deepened into night, Bruno stood alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside, Raphael sat at the kitchen table, listening as Bruno explained how to open a bank account with no credit, no past, no guarantees, just a willingness to begin again. From the garden path, Beatrice approached, holding 2 mugs. He'll be okay? She asked. He will, Bruno said, because someone showed him the door. She handed him a mug. You've come a long way. So have you, he replied. You didn't just survive him. You became something he could never be. She smiled faintly. I became myself. They stood in silence, sipping tea, watching the fireflies dance over the jasmine vines. Sophia's garden, now blooming with second chances. And in that moment, Bruno understood the true meaning of the title that once haunted him. Businessman abandoned his wife for his mistress. Days later, she returned as the mansion's new owner. But the real story wasn't about ownership. It was about resurrection. Not his, hers. And as the wind carried the sound of laughter through the trees, Bruno finally let go, not of her, but of the need to be anything other than what he was, a man who'd